back to the Django Brew Podcast, episode 5. My name is Sangeeta, and with me as always is Adam.
Hi, I'm so excited that we're going to record another podcast. It's been like
2 months,
7 years.
3 months?
Yeah. 2 months. Yeah,
right. No, I think 7 years.
Yeah, this should be fun.
So we are recording this at the beginning of the week. The weekend just went by. So Adam, how was your weekend? Was it nice and restful?
Yeah, it was great. I slept in a little bit. I worked around the house. How was your weekend?
Yeah, it was really good. One of my races actually got canceled because it was snowing.
So you could rest more.
I could rest more, yeah. So it's really funny that we're talking about resting because today's episode is going to be about building RESTful APIs in Django. See what I did there?
Yeah, I like that.
You see? Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I could come up with a nice joke for like GraphQL or...
Right, it would be a lot harder.
Yeah.
So all this talk about REST, I see it with all the capital letters, but what does REST even stand for?
So it means representational state transfer.
Oh, that doesn't really answer my question.
Yeah, well, when I think of REST, I just think of like, this is an API. Like, we're building an API, couple endpoints that return JSON and a status code, and that's my definition of REST.
When I think of REST, I think of endpoints and verbs. Like get, post, update, delete.
Yes.
To me, that seems very RESTful. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think when people think of APIs, they are mostly thinking about REST APIs. There's a endpoint, there's verbs. Usually it's JSON, but it doesn't have to be. It could be XML.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also GraphQL APIs, and there are other sorts of APIs. But I think REST is predominantly what people think about.
Yeah, so I like how you stated that REST is sort of like not defined clearly. And I think also the word API is very ambiguous. It's a very overloaded term. It can mean a lot of things. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. For me, what that translates to in my head is just an interface. And that can be sort of like, you don't need to know the underlying inner workings of some application. You just need to know how to retrieve data and update things. And you just need to know how you should talk to it. You don't need to know how it works behind the scenes.
There's a term called black box testing, which is kind of what I'm thinking about when you're talking about that, which is you are sending in inputs and you're getting out outputs, but you don't actually understand what the mechanism is behind the scenes. Yeah. And APIs are kind of like that to me. Mm-hmm. The confusing part is that APIs can be web-based, which is mostly what we're going to talk about for Django, but they can also be code, internal module APIs, where you're talking to the MD5 hashing library inside a Python. You don't have to understand the math that is going on behind there. You just call an API and get back some information from it.
Yeah. And also, like I used to get confused a lot when people would mention like third-party libraries and use the term API, like, oh, this library has such a clean API. And I would be like, but there is no like actual API, like REST API. So for me, I can see like that was confusing for me. Maybe that's confusing for other people, but API is loosely used in a lot of places.
We should come up with a different term. We're marketing geniuses on this
of course,
podcast,
clearly.
So what could we call an internal API?
Maybe. I don't know.
Instead of API, it'd be CRAPI. Code Representation Application Programming Interface.
CRAPI. Crappy.
Yeah, it's crappy.
It's crappy. Hey, that library has such a clean, crappy API.
It's like, I love this chai tea when you
yeah.
Or the ATM machine. I love the Python crappy. It's so great.
Not crappy.
It's so useful, elegant,
yes,
and smells Delightful.
Yeah. Also, you can even look at like regular things like your coffee machine and say like, "Oh, my coffee machine has such a like the buttons on it are such a nice API to making coffee." Like, yeah, you can literally call anything an API.
Have you ever read The Design of Everyday Things?
I've heard of it.
I have too. I have
You
never
have
read it.
I've never read it. It was
It's
mentioned I think a PyCon talk
oh really?
was yeah, it was named yeah.
It's sitting on my bookshelf. So if you
Oh,
ever want to
okay.
read
So
it,
okay.
I can mail it to you.
Yeah, sure.
My understanding is that it talks about everyday things like a doorknob or a tea
Or like a
kettle
plug. Yeah,
or a
yeah, yeah.
plug, and sort of talks about how it has an interface for humans to use, and the most useful things have the best, design
Mhm.
for people
Yeah.
to use.
Yeah, and I think maybe the important point there to me is that you build something in a useful way that so you think about your end users and what they would want, and you sort of like incorporate that in the design of the thing that you're building.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Apple used to have human interface guidelines, I think it was. It was a big document about how you're supposed to build applications on the Mac. For a long time, if you would open up a Mac application, they would all look the same. They would all work the same. They would have the same key bindings and
Oh,
mouse controls and
interesting.
stuff, because they sort of like had this spec. They would try to make everything follow.
Yeah, that's pretty nice, especially for consistency.
Yep.
Okay.
So right before we got on this call, I made some coffee. I think you made some coffee.
Yeah,
What
I
kind of
did.
coffee did you make?
So today I'm drinking my electrolyte coffee, my like 10th bag of
How many bags
this.
did you get? Did you get like a
Okay,
crate of coffee?
so like those subscription models and how they get you. Like
Yeah,
they
you
get you to
forget to.
sign yeah. So that has happened multiple times and now I have like a lot of coffee electrolyte coffee bags lying around.
So for multiple months, you just got
Yeah.
delivered, but you never actually canceled it. Okay.
Yeah, I never actually canceled it and I never like used it out where I needed to buy more, but more kept coming. So
Yeah.
I need to start drinking it, so I'm starting today.
You're the sucker who is making them all the
Yes, I
money.
know.
Yeah.
So what sort of coffee are you drinking, Adam?
Oh, mine's new too. Okay. Well, we ran out of our normal black and bold coffee,
Hmm.
so we got some Blue Bottle. Have you ever had Blue
Oh
Bottle?
yeah, there are like blue bottle stores all around the city that I've never tried, but I want to. Now I will.
They're a little snooty,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
do
yeah.
like the coffee. But they sell the beans too, so we got a bag of that, and it's really good. I really love it.
Nice. Wow.
I had some oat milk and brown sugar in there, and
Oh wow. Okay. Wow.
a
I
little
wonder
Barbie
where did
coffee
you?
going on.
Yeah, I need to make some Barbie coffee later. But actually, speaking of coffee, I got something last year from Black Friday sale. I got one of those Ember mugs. Have you heard of these?
I've heard of them.
So yeah, so they work really well, but I've noticed that I drink less coffee when I use them. Do you know why? Can you guess why?
Because it keeps it hotter.
Yeah, it keeps it hot and I can't like chug it down like when
Uh,
my regular coffee is getting cold.
can you? Is there like a temperature
Yeah, so
knob
there's
on
an
it?
app.
There's an app.
There's an app, a mobile app, and it has a really clean interface,
Of course,
API,
of
of
course.
course. And yeah, you can actually set like the temperature that you want your coffee to stay at, and it will stay there. And you also have to like charge the little like what is that? Like the
Like the
coffee.
base,
Yeah, the
or
base. Yeah, you have to
mm.
charge the base, and yeah, but it holds battery for quite a while.
So if you turn it all the way to the lowest setting, is it still too hot?
Oh, I haven't tried that. No, I should try that. That's a good idea. Like maybe I will use that more if I do that.
I'm solving all the
Thanks.
problems here.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I have to sign in. Okay.
Oh my
I'm gonna check
gosh.
this later.
Is there a
But yeah.
subscription fee for your coffee
No.
mug
No.
warmer upper?
If there was, I would probably be on it.
Well, I told you at some point that we had like multiple Amazon Prime subscriptions
Oh
going at
yeah. Oh
once.
my
We
god.
didn't know about it. It was awful.
Yeah, so were you like using both or you're just using like one of
No,
them?
we were just using one of them. We didn't know.
Oh my god. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
Amazon's not. Amazon is
Yeah.
like thrilled.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about REST APIs today and how to build them in Django with a couple of different tools. I assume that there are other tools out there, but there are three main ones that we know about, and we'll kind of give an overview of them and sort of our hot takes on them.
Yeah, sounds good. So, like you mentioned, yeah, there are third party libraries that we can use to build an API, but we can actually not use any of them and just use Django itself to build an API for us. And sometimes I actually do this when maybe like I need just an endpoint just to test something. You can technically do it, it's fine. So, how would you typically do this?
Yeah, I've done this as well. And it's basically like setting up any other view in Django. So you would set up an endpoint in your euros.py. And because I like function based views in my views.py, I would have a method which takes in a request. And then there is a JSON response that you can return from your method with a dictionary. And bingo bango, you have an API. It doesn't do much, but you could basically pass in different inputs into your method, and then you could return data in the JSON response.
Yeah, and you can do the same thing from a class based view. You can override the get or post methods of a class based view, a generic one, and just return a JSON response, which is just a dictionary with your JSON data. And there you go, you have an API view implemented with a class based view.
So, one of the things you get from the third party libraries for APIs is a way to validate the inputs that you're getting from external sources. So, think of someone passing in an ID that you want to use to look up a model. You can make sure that that ID is an integer and not a string. The way you can do that without any third party packages is you could use forms, like we talked about in our forms episode. You can validate the data that is getting passed into it. You could use Pydantic or Marshmallow or any of the other validation libraries
Mm-hmm.
which can do that for you.
Let's talk a little bit about auth. So, how would you protect your endpoints? There are a couple ways to do this without any third party libraries. So, just using vanilla Django, you can use things like middlewares to intercept each request and authenticate that request. So, say you're passing in a token or something, some sort of like, yeah, bearer token or access token. You can do certain checks within middlewares. You can also make your own decorator for your view functions or even your decorator equivalent of a class-based view and do those checks there. Or you can just do those authentication checks within the view logic themselves. So there are a couple different ways to do it. Just depends on how much control you want to have and how do you want to organize authentication across multiple endpoints.
I have done this and it kind of gets a little unwieldy over time
Yeah.
because you have to duplicate the same code in a lot of different places.
Hmm.
So, one of the pros of not using the third party packages is that you don't have any extra dependencies and all your code is kind of right there. You're in control of all the code.
Yeah.
However, the downside is that you do end up like duplicating a lot of this, or you build your own little mini framework that is less tested in production systems. And there might always be little bugs or things that you have to deal with that you didn't think about. So there are definitely some benefits to doing this, especially for like toy projects, in my
Hmm.
opinion, because you
Yeah.
sort of you understand more of how these things are built up and how all the pieces fit together. But for production sites, would you ever want to like build an
Uh,
API from scratch?
I mean, unless it's like one endpoint that I have to make, like a health check endpoint or something, then I would probably use. a third party library like DRF.
Yeah, me too.
Have you like so recently I got this what is it called? The Lametric, the LED,
Mm.
your custom LED
Yeah, yeah,
screener.
my tidbite.
So you have one, I have one. I started building like a small API so that it can display whatever I want.
That's so cool.
And it's supposed to integrate with the Strava API. So for that, I just have one endpoint so far that sort of aggregate data that I want from Strava or something else. So I'll have that pull my API like every 15 seconds or whatever. So yeah, for that, I just made like a vanilla Django endpoint, and that works fine so far.
For simple use cases, it is very quick and easy to set it up. That totally makes sense.
Yeah. So I like how we're sort of like going through the pros and cons, and we're sort of like building a case where it's like, okay, like these are the things that you could accomplish with vanilla Django, but these are all of the other things that you're missing out, or you can achieve more easily by using a third party. So
Maybe before we get to specifics, we could just talk about like in general, the third party packages will here are some of the benefits. So we already talked about auth a little bit. Most of them have a built-in way to deal with API keys and things like JOT authorization. So you don't have to try to deal with those things on your own or build them yourself. The other really big benefit that I get from these libraries is the API documentation. So you get a page that you can go to. It lists all the endpoints that are available and gives you sort of like a playground where you can call different endpoints and then get back results right there. And so it's easier for testing purposes, and it's like documenting the API for you.
and you don't have to use something like curl or postman to test your API. You have this tool built in and you can use that, and yeah, it's really great.
All right, well, let's talk about DRF or Django REST Framework because that is probably the most popular way to make RESTful APIs in Django.
Yeah, DRF is one of the most popular choices for building REST APIs. There are more packages, but I think for a long time it has been the standard for just building good RESTful APIs.
And I feel like it's been around forever.
Yeah, I think when I started Django, like DRF was already out and people were already using it a lot. So for me, I think DRF is a framework on top of the Django framework. So it's a lot to learn. There is, I think, definitely a learning curve there. It gives you a lot of tools, but you can build really robust APIs with those tools. But there's definitely a lot to work through.
Yeah, it's very opinionated about how it wants you to write your code, and then it creates the routes and the endpoints based on that. So in a way, it's kind of nice because it takes away a lot of the questions of how should I structure my API endpoints, which you have to think about when you do the vanilla Django way. But there is a lot of you said learning curve. There's a lot of documentation. They have their own words for certain things. You kind of have to understand how DRF wants to be used to build your API.
So some of the most popular parts of DRF are mainly the serializers and the view sets. So maybe you can talk a little bit about serializers
Yeah,
first.
what is a serializer in DRF?
Yeah, so a serializer is very similar to a form, something that you define, a class, that allows your data types to be converted from Python data types to JSON or whatever other output types that your API supports.
So you have an employee model and there's a name and a birthday on it. And so it basically can convert name and birthday to JSON with just a Python type of a string and a date time. So it can like convert that. Or if you have an endpoint that takes in an integer, there is a serializer that makes sure that input is an actual integer and not a series of letters.
Yeah. And this really reminds me of Django forms. I mean, I think serializers were modeled after Django forms. So you define, it's very similar to like a model form or even just a regular form. You define the types or the fields and the corresponding types, and then you can add your custom validation logic and other things in there. So they're really actually very similar to forms. If you've ever used forms before, you'll find it a lot of the same things overlap.
It's almost frustrating sometimes because they are so closely, they look so similar, but you can't use them the same way. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you do feel like you're duplicating code sometimes, which is a
Uh-huh.
little annoying. But yeah, they do remind me of forms a lot.
Yeah, I think one thing about serializers is that, much like forms, you define how your data should be parsed, but also like the representation of that data in an API. So there's a lot of like representational logic that you can tweak to really control what your API outputs, and that's, I think there was a lot of like confusion there for me at first, like learning how to manipulate data and especially things like foreign keys and many to many fields on different models, like how to get that to display the way that I want. Yeah, there can be some confusion there.
Okay, so you mentioned view sets, which is kind of like the advanced class of DRF.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about like how to set up your views in the
Like build
simplest
up to that.
way. Yeah, and then we'll get to the view sets. So there are function based views in DRF.
Yeah. Yeah, you can define a function based view and just wrap it in DRF's API view decorator. And there you go. You have a function based view that you can put all your, if you don't like class based views, that's the option for you. Next, you have the API view, which is DRF's equivalent of Django's view class based view. So there you can sort of override the get and post methods and do your stuff just like you would do in a regular class based view. And then you have generic class based views, which combine those different verbs, HTTP verbs. So they sort of like, you can have like list or create view, and then retrieve, update, delete view, and other combinations like that. So it kind of makes it easy to design your API. And one thing that I've observed is that those generic class-based views sort of enforce good API design
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of like forces you to structure your API. Like, okay, if I have like slash employees, maybe that would be like a list or create endpoint. And then there's the generic view for that. But if you're looking at like a single resource, there's like those generic views that allow you to view or update or delete that single resource. So it really kind of enforces that, and I really like that a lot.
Yeah, it provides that structure that so you don't have to think about how the endpoints are going to be laid out.
Yeah, exactly. And then view sets. You want to talk about view sets, Adam?
Yeah, so view sets are the very end. It takes all those class based views and wraps them all together. So all your related views would be combined into one view set. So it's a way to structure your code so that all those things are tied together. And they don't use get or post, but instead it's like list or create or update. So they kind of are more opinionated about what they call those things.
For me, like view sets are like the zen of like DRF class based views. It's like the one class that does everything.
Do you find that it's hard to understand what is actually happening because it's all abstracted away from you? Or is it like that is useful because you don't really have to think about what's happening?
Actually, yeah, that's a really good point. I think I find it a little confusing just because like so much is abstracted away, and if you do have things that you want to do like sort of out of the box that doesn't conform to the regular like maybe list or create or things like that, you have to make sure that your serializers work well in the way that you expect. And on the view set side, you have to know sort of like how you want to design your endpoints and and what serializers you want to make. So a lot of times you might make like different serializers based on the different operations that you want to do. So you might have like a read serializer and a write serializer for the same model and just like use those together. So yeah, it is a little confusing when you kind of like start to abstract things, I think in general. What about you?
I've gone back and forth about this over the years, so my opinion has probably changed a bunch. At the beginning, I felt really constrained by how opinionated DRF was. I wanted my API to look a certain way, but DRF didn't, right? And I was
Yeah.
like always sort of trying to figure out how to like change things in DRF or do things in DRF to make things the way that I wanted them to be in my API.
Hmm.
The last time I used DRF, I was like, what is the DRF way? I'm just going to do whatever
Yeah.
DRF wants me to do, and
Right.
I'm not going to try to change anything. And that was really pleasant. That was like, I
Yeah.
think the way that it's designed to be used, it solves the 80% of what most people are going to want out of a RESTful API. If you want your API to be custom or do something that's a little outside of the norm, then I find DRF really hard to work with. As long as you're okay with how DRF wants to output its data, then usually it works pretty well.
I feel the same way. Like as long as you're not fighting against it, you're
Yes.
probably fine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I do feel like since DRF and Django, they are very similar. Like, you know, you have Django forms, you have DRF serializers, you have Django class based views, you have DRF serializer views, you have Django authentication backends, and then you have DRF authentication classes. So there's a lot of like parity between both frameworks. So in that way, DRF just like sort of like fits in nicely. Because of that, there is that learning curve that I will go back to again. So it's nice, but I think if you use it a lot and you have experience using it, then it's kind of like maybe your go-to framework.
Yeah.
So Adam, for a while, like a lot of people actually wanted DRF to be included in core Django, and it's still not. But I don't know. I would have probably liked it to maybe a while ago, but there's a lot of different libraries coming out, so we have more choices. But what are your thoughts on that? Should it have been included? Should it still be included in core Django?
Yeah, I think it's hard because there are a lot of people who do use Django as just an API backend. So for them, it probably would have been helpful if they could just install Django and they would have a RESTful API that worked as they wanted to and didn't have to install another package, look through a lot more documentation, different ways to set it up. I think the reason they didn't include DRF into Django is because it is such a big package. It has so much code, and it would be more of a burden for the maintainers of Django. So, keeping it separate let the maintainers of DRF move as fast as they want to, fix bugs, etc., without
Yeah.
being tied to the Django release schedule. I do wish it was not either or, but sort of somewhere in the middle where there was more in core Django that allowed you to build an API, but maybe not as much functionality as DRF. Like you can
Hmm.
still keep some of that
Yeah.
separate, but not having to pull in a separate package just for like a really minimal API, I think would have been useful. But I think that ship has sort of sailed at this point. So one of the nice things about not including DRF in Django Core is that Django Ninja started up. They have sort of a different approach to creating APIs, and I don't know if that would have caught on to the extent that it has if DRF was built into Django. So there is some argument to keeping certain things outside of Django Core so that the ecosystem can continue to evolve and make up new ways to solve problems.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
also beneficial.
Yeah, I agree because yeah, keeping it outside Django. So we always have a bunch of different options.
And you mentioned the third party packages for Django. There are third party packages just for DRF. So, DRF filters is a very popular package and it's just for DRF. I think they have some JOT and there's also DRF Spectacular, which is another open API implementation for DRF. So, it's kind of neat to have these third party packages for third party packages. Like it's you don't see
Right.
it all
Yeah.
that often, but it is cool when like, people are building things on top of a third party package. So that
Yeah.
sort of maybe speaks to how integral DRF is in the ecosystem, how many people use it and love it, and how it is just
It's still flourishing, I think, when you
yeah.
see just yeah, packages being built on top of it. And that means there's still activity, there's still interest, and that's like the love that we see for Django. So we all love DRF. Let's talk about the other loved package for
The
building
upstart,
REST APIs. No.
the newcomer.
Yeah. Django Ninja. So I admit I don't have a lot of Django Ninja experience as I have with DRF, but I have used it a little bit and I found it really refreshing. Kind of like Fast API. Like it's new, it's newer than Django, but it offers like a really nice spin with Pydantic. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I you mentioned Fast API. Maybe I'll start there. So Fast API is relatively new. It has caught fire in the Python community because it is sort of like a spiritual successor to Flask, I think, but focused on APIs. So it is feels small and focused on just building APIs. It is async first, so I think people like that, and it has really taken hold in the ML and data science community. One of the neat things about Fast API is it has a tight integration with a library called Pydantic. We have mentioned Pydantic a couple times, but it is a serializer and validation library. It uses a lot of the newer Python typing to provide a nice API for that validation. So instead of,
Adam, have you used API in the other term just now?
oh no, so confusing.
Yeah.
So so instead of having fields on a class and saying like models dot text field, it would just say colon string, and you know that that field is going to be a string. It doesn't need anything else. So that's Pydantic. Django Ninja was created to make APIs in Django that use Pydantic and are sort of set up in the same way. So the serializers for Django Ninja look a little more approachable. They're a little easier to read than the DRF serializers.
Yeah, so in DRF you have serializers and in Django Ninja you have schemas,
Yep,
and
that's
that's
right.
sort of like the DRF equivalent there. Okay, that's pretty nice.
The other selling point for Django Ninja is that it can be used async. It is built with Django's async functionality from the beginning, whereas when DRF was created, there was no async Django. So it doesn't have the same support as Django Ninja does.
And from a usability perspective, if you love function-based views, you would probably love Django Ninja because there's no class-based views in Django Ninja. Everything is wrapped with the Django Ninja decorator, and you can pass in things just through that decorator. So no class-based views to wrangle with.
Yeah, that's a selling point to me because I don't love CBVs. I kind of like the function based approach. So having the decorator, you still have modules to group your functionality, but like DRF feels very class heavy, and Django Ninja
Yeah.
is very not.
And in Django Ninja, the validation feels a little more seamless because it relies on the typing, the Python types. Whereas in DRF, if you're making like a serializer that's not tied to any model, then you have to like specify like whatever types those fields are and add custom validation for those things.
Right. And we should mention that both of them, if you're just using models, will just build the serializer or the schema based on the model and the fields in that model. So they're similar in that respect.
Yeah. And another selling point with Django Ninja is the automatic open API docs that you get just for free. So that's pretty nice. And I kind of like, personally, I think I like the open API docs more than the DRF browsable API. To me, it just looks a little more user friendly. And for different API endpoints, you can see the payload types and more information there. So I think that's pretty nice when you're just testing out your APIs.
Yeah, I don't know if DRF Spectacular gives you the same open API interface, but at least out of the box, I like the open API style as well.
Yeah.
And I also
Yeah.
like that there's like an authorization that you can pass in. So like if you're using JOTS to authenticate your API endpoints, you have a way to test that in the browsable API thing.
Yeah. So we've talked about DRF and Django Ninja. Both are really good options for building APIs. But the question is, when would you choose one over the other? Because I feel like both do a lot. Django Ninja seems pretty easy to set up and it feels pretty seamless with the Pydantic typing. On the other hand, DRF offers a lot more tools to help you build more robust APIs. So definitely maybe it depends sort of is a sort of answer, but yeah, let me know what you think.
Doesn't it always depend? I think
It
it
always
always
depends.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you already have a lot of experience with DRF, then switching to something else doesn't seem like it would buy you a lot. I think the reason to switch to Django Ninja, if you already have async or you think async is going to be beneficial for your use case, then that's built in. And if you want something that just feels a little bit lighter and more seamless, and you don't want to go through the learning curve, then Django Ninja is really great. The downside is that it doesn't have the same third party ecosystem for it, and there aren't as many people using it. So when you go on Stack Overflow or you're looking for, is this a bug or, what is going on here? Like, there are just less people using Django Ninja, but it is deployed in production. I probably have more limited experience with Django Ninja than DRF, but I
Yeah.
really liked building the APIs that I did in Django Ninja. So I would suggest trying it out. If you have a simpler API that you want to build and you want to try out something that's a little bit less complicated than DRF.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, Adam. It definitely depends, and I like to always say like choose the path of least resistance. So if you're already accustomed, like you said, building with DRF, building APIs with DRF, definitely use that. But to me, like Django Ninja seemed a little more. It felt a little more refreshing. So I do want to use it a little more. I think I've yet to stumble across some of the pain points, but I think so far it's working well for simpler APIs.
With some of our episodes, we have made a sample project, and we're going to do that with this one as well. So we'll have some examples of both DRF and Django Ninja. If you want to see how they look side by side, you can go to our GitHub account, which is Django Brew, and there's what we call the pantry.
Yeah.
It has a bunch of sample code.
So, Adam, are you watching any new TV shows or anything? I have you watched Severance? Please tell me you have.
I watched the first 3 episodes of the first season
Yes, and why haven't you watched the rest?
because it's on Apple TV and nobody's on Apple TV. I'm not subscribed to Apple TV.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and I
good
don't want
excuse.
to.
But it's really good. The second season just came out, and I watched like the first two episodes, and then I'm like, oh my god, this is going too good. I need to save up all of the episodes so that I can binge watch it. So Netflix just spoiled us with like releasing like a whole season at once, and that
Yeah.
definitely spoiled us. Yeah.
I watched the Buffy movie, which
Okay, I never
has
watched that.
Pee Wee Herman is in the Buffy movie. You know who Pee Wee Herman is?
No.
Oh my god,
No, wait.
you don't know who Pee Wee Herman is?
Oh yeah, I've seen his face. Yeah, I know him. Kinda.
Oh no. Oh no, it's so old. So old.
Oh.
He had like a kid show in like the 90s, I think.
Oh, okay.
And the Pee Wee's Big Top, I think, is a movie.
Hmm. He reminds me of like Mr. Bean. I don't know.
Yeah, like a skinnier, yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Bean. He's kind of similar. Yeah, and wears the suit.
Yeah. Have you seen like Mr. Bean's movies like Johnny English? Those like Johnny English series?
I never, I think I've seen one. I've
Okay.
seen a Mr. Bean movie, but I
Hmm.
don't remember which one it was. It was a long time ago.
Also, like, okay, speaking of Mr. Bean, there was a Netflix show about, well, with Mr. Bean, and he was like, what is it called? But it's about him and a bee, and it's so funny. It's he's house sitting for this like really rich couple, and a bee flies in, and like it just the bee is giving him a run for his money. Like he's trying to get rid of the bee, and the bee always keeps coming back, and he kind of like wrecks the whole house at the end of the show. You should watch it. It's really good.
He always strikes me as it's all like physical comedy. You don't,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't realize you were like a physical comedy sort of person.
I didn't know that too. But yeah, I like Mr. Bean.
That's pretty
Yeah.
funny. There's a bunch of UK shows that are kind of like,
Yeah.
they're all goofy, like
Yeah.
comedy sort of stuff that we watch.
Yeah, the UK humor is very dry, and it's like a different type of humor, but it's still pretty funny, I think.
Yeah, I really like it.
Have you watched Okay, another one. I recently watched this like a couple days ago called Don't Worry Darling with Florence Pugh
Oh
and
yeah,
Harry
I saw that.
Styles. Oh
Mhm.
my god. What did you think of it?
Did
Like,
you? I was gonna say, did you like this?
so I like the beginning, like the build up, but then the ending was sort of like rushed a little bit, I feel
hmm
like.
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked the way it looked. I like that it was like the like mid-century modern,
1950s.
like yeah,
Yeah.
desert, sort of that I thought was super cool. Like I like the atmosphere.
Hmm.
I enjoy a twist ending. It felt like it wasn't like a satisfying twist. It was
Yeah.
like, wait, what? And
Yeah.
also like that doesn't really make any sense. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, maybe rushed is the right way to
Yeah.
describe it,
Yeah.
because I wanted it to like actually,
Yeah.
make sense.
I wanted more answers. Like I feel like they kind of skirted around like the explanation of what was going on, but they didn't really like answer all the questions of like
Hmm
why certain things happened, or how did certain things how is it even possible, so
hmm
yeah.
Yeah, I wanted it to be better, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, but Florence Pugh was amazing. She's yeah, I mean, yeah, she was really good. Oh, I tried something recently that I'm not sure if you tried. Have you tried the viral Dubai chocolate?
No,
Do you
I don't
even
know
know?
anything about this. No.
So I think it went viral on TikTok, and I don't even have a TikTok, and I still heard about it. So
Sure, sure.
I don't. Okay. So, anyways, so Dubai chocolate is like a chocolate that is filled with like this pistachio filling,
Mm.
and it's like a really thick chocolate. So when you break it, it's like this filling is just like oozing out, and it's supposed to be like really good. So I bought 3 bars of this Dubai chocolate. And by the way, like I don't know if it's like one particular brand that made it popular, but like a lot of different places are making their own versions of it.
Mm.
So the one I got was all the way from Australia. And it's kind of hard finding a vegan Dubai chocolate, so that's why, I had to resort to,
The
halfway across the
Australians.
world. Yeah, exactly. The down under. So I got a couple that is filled with a Biscoff filling, So not
Hmm.
really pistachio, which I was kind of disappointed with, but it still tastes super good. And the filling is like kind of like creamy and sort of crunchy. And I think that's the same with the pistachio. It's supposed to be like this kind of crunchy filling. So
Hmm.
I'm pretty happy with it and it tastes really good.
They look really good. They're pretty looking. The ones that you got, at least.
Yeah, they have like some glitter and stuff on it. So
I was listening to a podcast with Mr. Beast. Do you know who Mr. Beast
yeah,
is? Have you heard
yeah,
of this person?
I have, yes.
And he was talking about his chocolate bars.
Oh, he has chocolate bars now?
Yeah, I know.
What doesn't he have?
I didn't even know. Yeah, so he's making chocolate bars, but he was talking about how this is going to be a downer. How a lot of the chocolate in the chocolate bars are like picked by children, by like children
Oh,
workers in like West Africa,
oh
and
my god.
how
Okay.
he wanted to make sure that his chocolate was all farmed like
An
in a
ethical.
ethical way. Exactly. But
Yeah.
he mentioned Tony Chocolonely or something like that. Have you seen these chocolate bars?
No, no. Wait, is that his brand of chocolate bars?
No, no, no. His is
Oh,
Feastables.
oh, yeah. I've seen the Tony's one. Tono. I've
Tono.
seen the Tony Chocolini.
Yeah,
I think I've
what is it?
tried
Chocolonely?
Choco
Chocolate
Chocoloni.
Chocolonely. Tony's Chocolonely. Yes. And so Tony's Chocolonely's big deal is that they don't use exploited labor. And
Oh,
so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna try to find this Tony Chocolonely
you're saying a
chocolate
different name
bars.
every time. Like you're making it Italian now. Like
Chocolonely. Gonna have to cut that.
no.
I'm gonna buy these Tony C chocolate bars because like Mr. Beast doesn't need any more
Yeah,
money. I don't want to
of
give him money,
course.
but this Tony
Chocoloni.
Chocolonely seems like an okay dude. So
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
this has been good. We've talked about building APIs in Django and a couple different packages that people can use. I'd love to hear from people what they use to build RESTful APIs in Django. Yeah, and how that goes for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I want to hear what's people's favorite package and why.
Thanks for listening, and make sure to give us 5 stars. And you can find this podcast and all of our old episodes on djangobrew.com. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Every recording starts with us laughing.
I know. Because that countdown is so scary.
I know. Why do they? I don't need the countdown. Just
Yeah.
start. This is
Uh,
this is no good.
can you ask me that again?
This is what happens when I'm not like ready. We're gonna have to cut all this out.
Oh, these filler words. Okay. Probably take like some of that.
Yeah, so some
yeah.
of that is okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm gonna go back.
So you're in for a treat.
What am I gonna say next?
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Is this useful? Is this good?
I hit my thing again. Ah!
Ah. Well, it doesn't make any sense.
I'm not gonna watch that. It's too old.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. right.
So you eat the one chip and then you die? Well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really thinking about this from a higher level, you see.
I don't know how interesting any of this is.
Bye, Felicia.